Light flurries danced around me as I stood nervously at the grand entrance of the Huntington estate, clutching a carefully wrapped gingerbread cake. My mother-in-law, Eleanor Huntington, gave it a look as if I'd just handed her something unspeakably vulgar, tapping her delicate fingers impatiently against the silk sleeve of her custom-tailored gown. "Oh, Clara, you shouldn't have bothered," she drawled, barely masking her contempt. "We have professional caterers. They handle desserts far more tastefully." Behind her, my husband Alex shifted awkwardly, suddenly absorbed by the pattern on the polished marble floor. I'd poured my heart into baking that gingerbread, using a treasured recipe handed down through generations. But Eleanor Huntington saw only something painfully domestic and embarrassingly ordinary, worlds away from her polished existence. Her gaze traveled disdainfully over my deep blue dress, the nicest thing I owned, though clearly not up to Eleanor's opulent standards. "Didn't we agree on formal evening wear for our holiday gala?" she asked, voice dripping with disdain. "This isn't one of your elementary school parent meetings?" I felt heat rise in my cheeks. My simple dress had cost me weeks of frugality, something Eleanor, supported effortlessly by her husband Philip's thriving hedge fund, would never comprehend. "I think Clara looks lovely," my sister-in-law Kate attempted quietly, only to quickly wilt beneath Eleanor's piercing glare. "Lovely isn't our benchmark," Eleanor snapped. "Tonight's guests include senators and ambassadors. We have a reputation, dear." I caught sight of my reflection in the large antique mirror behind her. At 30, I possessed a natural glow Eleanor's cosmetic treatments couldn't mimic. Yet apparently youth didn't matter if your attire was from a discount store. "Where's your jewelry?" Eleanor asked, with sharp skepticism, narrowing her eyes at the delicate silver locket around my neck, a keepsake from my late mother. "Has Alex still not bought you something more suitable?" My husband finally stirred to life. "Mother," he began weakly, avoiding my pleading gaze, "maybe tonight we can just what?" Eleanor's voice turned icy. "Pretend your wife understands her position in our family?" "Alex, when you insisted on marrying a middle school teacher, I humored it as youthful rebellion, not a permanent embarrassment. 5 long years filled with subtle humiliations and overt disdain, with Alex promising repeatedly he'd speak up, only to crumble beneath the weight of Eleanor's displeasure every single time. Taking a calming breath, I tried once more. "Eleanor, I appreciate you have certain expectations." "Expectations?" She laughed harshly, the sound as cutting as broken crystal. "I expected my son to choose someone capable of bearing the Huntington name with grace. Instead, she gestured dismissively at me. He brings home a woman who thinks a homemade cake is suitable for an event catered by Michelin star chefs, who arrives in something so obviously off the rack when every guest tonight will be draped in Dior or Valentino." At that moment, the distant sound of arriving cars drifted through the door, signaling guests' imminent arrival. Eleanor's eyes hardened. "Alex, perhaps it would be best if Clara didn't remain for the evening." The familiar stab of betrayal twisted painfully inside me. Not that Alex siding with his mother was new, but tonight, surrounded by twinkling lights and snow softly blanketing the gardens, holding a dessert baked with genuine love in my hands, it felt final. "Better for whom, Alex?" My voice was steady but filled with quiet pain. "Clara, please," Eleanor warned softly, eyes darting nervously towards the approaching silhouettes at the door. "Not now. We'll handle this privately." I turned slowly to my husband, his eyes glued shamefully to the floor, then back to Eleanor, who was already composing a gracious smile for her arriving guests. Finally, I glanced down at the gingerbread cake. My heart poured into it, for a family who'd never appreciated me. "You know what?" I said calmly, gently placing my carefully baked cake on an ornate hall table. "You're right. This isn't my place, and it never will be." "This isn't my world," I said clearly, my voice echoing gently against the marble walls of the grand entryway. "Maybe it never was." Eleanor exhaled sharply, visibly relieved. "Finally, Clara, some clarity." She turned sharply to Alex, muttering under her breath. "Escort her quietly through the back. I won't have her humiliating us further." But I stood firm, raising my chin defiantly. "No," I said calmly. If I'm leaving, it's through the front door, just like all your honored guests." Eleanor's eyes widened in shock. "You wouldn't dare cause a scene." Without another word, I moved confidently toward the main entrance and swung the heavy door open just as Senator Morgan and his wife were about to knock. "Clara?" Senator Morgan's face brightened with genuine delight. "Is everything all right? You're not leaving already, I hope. The kids always talk about how much they adore your classes." "Just a small misunderstanding," I replied smoothly, watching Eleanor's carefully constructed expression of superiority crumble into confusion. "Please, have a wonderful evening, and tell Andrew I loved his performance in the school play." The senator's wife smiled warmly, exchanging confused glances as they moved past me. Eleanor, caught off guard, struggled to piece together how their influential guests knew me so personally. What none of the Huntingtons realized was that my modest teaching salary wasn't my entire story. My mother had left me a modest inheritance, which, invested wisely, had flourished into substantial wealth. In the evenings, while Alex attended his mother's extravagant dinners, I'd quietly built an education tech startup that was now worth tens of millions. The Huntington estate itself, the jewel in Eleanor's crown, was teetering precariously due to Philip's reckless financial choices. How did I know this? Quietly, anonymously, I'd secured a seat on the board of the investment firm holding their massive mortgage. As snowflakes gently tapped against my windshield, my phone vibrated repeatedly. Desperate messages from Alex filled the screen. "Clara, please come back. Mother didn't mean it. We'll talk tomorrow. Just don't leave like this." Ignoring them, I dialed my financial advisor. "Matthew," I said calmly, "you remember the Huntington property we discussed? Let's proceed." Because Eleanor was right, I didn't belong in their world. I was about to quietly take it over. 2 months passed swiftly, bringing me to the office of my attorney, Sarah, to finalize arrangements for the estate auction. Philip Huntington's financial empire had unraveled spectacularly, dragging Eleanor's carefully maintained social facade down with it. "Everything's in order for tomorrow's auction," Sarah confirmed gently. "You're sure about this? Your bid is significantly higher than market value." A satisfied smile crossed my lips, picturing Eleanor forced to explain to her social circle why their beloved mansion was being lost. "I'm absolutely certain," I replied calmly. "The bid is fully anonymous." Sarah nodded. "Completely untraceable to you, under an independent holding company, as requested." My phone buzzed again. Another plea from Alex. "Mother's inconsolable. Father's barely coping. We can still fix this." I added it to the growing archive of unanswered texts. Since Christmas Eve, Alex had swung from fury to apology to desperation. Eleanor even attempted a surprise visit to my prestigious private school, only to be politely turned away by security. Apparently, the Huntington name didn't grant automatic privileges everywhere. I smiled slightly, glancing at Sarah. "Did you know Eleanor once called teaching a hobby for those without ambition? Funny, considering half the children of her closest friends attend my school." The auction itself was satisfying in its quiet inevitability. I didn't attend, instead spending the day teaching my students about kindness and resilience. But word reached me soon enough. Eleanor, confident a friend would rescue her, had watched helplessly as the mansion sold to an anonymous buyer. Instead, an unknown corporate entity quietly outbid every contender, placing a cash offer with a peculiar stipulation. The Huntingtons had precisely 30 days to vacate. "Clara," Alex found me outside the school gates the following week, looking disheveled and desperate. "Please," Mother's beside herself. "That estate has been ours for generations." "Has it really?" I countered calmly, reaching into my bag. "Because the public property records tell another story." I handed him a file. "Your parents acquired the mansion 12 years ago from the Millers. It seems Eleanor's claims about legacy were just another convenient fiction." Alex's face fell, the color draining from his cheeks. He tried again, pleading, "We offered more than the buyer's price." They wouldn't budge. "Offered with what money?" I challenged gently. "The funds your father squandered, or perhaps the sums your mother spent on her endless vanity projects?" When moving day arrived, crisp sunlight filled the morning sky. I decided to supervise personally, ensuring a smooth transition. Eleanor hovered anxiously, barking orders about antiques she swore were priceless heirlooms, while Philip retreated to his office, already drinking by noon. Be cautious with that, Eleanor snapped, as movers lifted a delicate chaise lounge. It costs more than you earn in a year. Actually, I interjected calmly, scanning my checklist. According to our records, most of these pieces were rentals. The chaise belongs to Prestige Rentals and must be returned immediately. Eleanor spun around, her eyes wide with shock. What on earth are you doing here? Representing the new property owners, I replied smoothly. We're conducting a final walkthrough before collecting the keys. You? Eleanor sputtered furiously. You have no right. She has every right, a voice interjected softly. It was Alex's younger sister, Sophia, looking drained, yet defiant. Clara is the new owner. A stunned silence enveloped the room. Even the movers paused, looking on curiously. Impossible, Eleanor whispered, her voice strained. Clara's just a school teacher. Sophia laughed bitterly. Did you never wonder why the terms were so specific? Who else knows your lives intimately enough to set such exact conditions? Eleanor's disbelief hardened. Ridiculous. She couldn't afford… Actually, Sophia continued calmly, I've done my research. Clara's educational technology firm is valued in the millions. That simple school she teaches at, it educates the children of senators and CEOs. Oh, and the homemade pie you ridiculed. It was a family recipe from the Montgomery side. Eleanor's complexion drained of color. The Montgomery family name carried weight, wealth that quietly shaped entire industries without the need for showy extravagance. Sophia's eyes met mine knowingly. Your father was Charles Montgomery's son, wasn't he? The renowned entrepreneur and philanthropist. That's right, I confirmed gently, lowering the clipboard. The same Charles Montgomery who established the investment bank that owned your mortgage. Family connections can indeed be surprising. Eleanor sank onto the empty staircase, her designer dress crumpling beneath her. All along. Yes, I agreed gently. While you were busy dismissing me, you failed to notice who I really was. By the way, that charity board position you coveted so deeply, I've held it discreetly for years. They personally recommended my school to Senator Morgan. Alex appeared suddenly, looking shell-shocked. You bought our family home? Not precisely, I corrected, with a quiet dignity. I purchased my home. You're simply former occupants now required to leave. Eleanor's voice rose in accusation. This was your revenge, wasn't it? Because of Christmas Eve? No, Eleanor, I responded, with quiet confidence. This was merely a smart investment, but if it provides a glimpse of how you've treated me all these years, well, consider that a fortunate coincidence. I walked slowly through the mansion, now stripped of its rented glamour and hollow pretenses. My footsteps echoed quietly against marble floors that belonged fully and indisputably to me. As I reached the entrance, I turned briefly. Any future communications will go strictly through legal channels. Philip finally emerged from his office, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but I shook my head lightly. There was nothing left to say. The snowfall outside was soft, a stark contrast to the heaviness settling inside my heart as I stood alone in the grand, now empty hall of the Anderson mansion. The same hall that, just 2 months earlier, had witnessed my humiliation at their Christmas gathering. A quiet voice echoed through my thoughts, pulling me from contemplation. Divorce? James' voice trembled. His eyes were wide, disbelief evident. Emma, you can't mean it. Did you honestly think I'd stay after the way you treated me? After 5 years of choosing their approval over me? My voice remained calm, even as his composure crumbled. Consider this my final lesson. Never underestimate someone based on appearances. Victoria, clearly shaken but not yet defeated, interjected sharply, her voice cracking under the strain. You realize you're destroying your reputation, don't you? The governor's family, the Rockefellers. They will never respect someone who acts this way. You mean the same Rockefellers who invited me personally to Emily's birthday party? Or the governor's wife, who just last week requested my involvement in her educational charity? I paused, watching Victoria's carefully constructed image collapse under the weight of reality. Face it, Victoria. It's not me who's unwelcome in high society now. I extended my hand, my gaze fixed steadily upon hers. The keys, please. Hours later, after Victoria had reluctantly retreated to her sister's spare guest house, After Thomas had moved into his smaller condo and James had drifted away, I stood alone, savoring the quiet triumph that filled the silence. My phone buzzed gently, breaking the solitude. It was a text from Rachel. "For what it's worth, Emma, you were always too good for our family." A faint smile crossed my lips, satisfaction mingling with a pang of sadness. The irony was profound. Once they'd considered themselves untouchable, looking down on me from their false pedestal of wealth and prestige. But the mansion they once used as a symbol of their superiority would now serve a far greater purpose. Plans were already in motion. This vast house, built on foundations of arrogance, would soon become the Elizabeth Montgomery Children's Center, named after my mother. It would serve all children, without discrimination, offering healing and comfort to those who needed it most. The foyer where my homemade pie had been dismissed with scorn would become a welcoming lobby, a place where no one would ever be judged by appearances or background. And me? I returned happily to my classroom, continuing to teach kindergarten, baking pies using my grandmother's beloved recipes. But whispers would continue in the circles that once shunned me, the story of the quiet teacher who had brought the mighty Anderson family to their knees. Because in the end, the greatest revenge isn't merely to take away someone's house. It's transforming a symbol of exclusion into a beacon of acceptance. And as they learned too late, never judge someone by appearances, especially when that person quietly holds the keys to your entire world.